Scrap mechanic helicopters are one of the most enjoyable types of creations to not just build but also play around with. But that's only if you're using a decent helicopter. This video should take you through the entire 5-step process to making a capable vanilla helicopter. And we're starting with step 1, the body. It's nothing functional yet. I mean, it doesn't even have to look like a helicopter if you don't want it to. So I'm just gonna get building. This is what I managed to build in about 20 minutes, and yeah, with some glitch worlds I could make it look a lot better, but for the sake of the tutorial I'm just going to keep it simple and go with this. This is a vertical motion sensor. It's a perfectly weighted block on top of a piece of suspension set up in such a way that it's hovering right in the middle of those two sensors, which means they're both detecting it. And that also means that as you go up, one of the sensors stops detecting it, and as you go down, the other sensor stops detecting it. And that means that this small device can actually detect whether your creation is accelerating upwards or downwards. And so if you feed that into the controller that controls the angle of the thrusters, you can actually have working altitude hold in vanilla. So to set it up, it's pretty simple. You just need some thrusters that are mounted to a single bearing, just like this. You need a controller, the vertical motion sensor, and some logic. So the first thing we need to do is take the controller and hook it into all of these bearings. Then make sure that all the angles are going downwards. And I'll have them all angled down a total of 30 degrees. This angle might be subject to change, but we'll find out later. Now this logic gate here is only active when we're going downwards. So if I hook that into a logic gate and then into the controller, now when we're going downwards, it will start to angle these thrusters down to compensate. And this logic gate is active when we're going up. So that means this logic gate needs to be off when we're going up. And so we can do that with a very simple AND gate shutoff. So if I just grab another logic gate and hook this into that one and make it a NOR, now it's going to be the reverse of whatever that is. So I just hook this into the AND gate, and now this will only be active if this is not active. And now we're going to need our manual controls. So this will be up and this will be down. To go up, we just need to override that thing's signal. So that's pretty simple. We just disconnect it from the controller and connect it to an OR gate instead and hook the up button into that. So now when we press up, it starts angling the thrusters. And as for down, well, that's even simpler. We just hook that straight into the NOR gate. So now both this and this have to be off in order for that controller to angle the thrusters downwards. And lastly, we need a switch that actually turns on the thrusters themselves. Okay, and in theory, that should be everything. This is irrelevant, by the way. It's just a gyro, so I can focus on this rather than my pitch and roll. So now when I press the on button, they turn on, and when I press the up button, they start angling downwards, and eventually they will go far enough down that we start lifting off the ground, just like that. And when I let go of the one key, you can see that it's automatically adjusting. You can see this bar triggering and untriggering those sensors. So as we go down, it activates the controller, and as we go back up, it deactivates the controller. And what we're left with is a very stable hover. It's so stable that I don't even have to be on the seat. It'll just do its own thing. Eventually it will fall to the ground, but that can be changed with the controller over here. If you just adjust these angles, it changes the angle of these sensors, which then changes whether it's biased towards up or down. And obviously the reason why this is so much better than the other options is because if I were to add a bunch more mass, just like so, you can see that the thrusters are automatically compensating. We're not falling right now, even though I just added a massive chunk of concrete to the front. That's the beauty of this method. As you fire off more and more missiles, the thrusters will automatically compensate, and you pretty much never have to think about your collective again. Just go up when you want to go up and down when you want to go down, and that's about it. Either way, that's the general concept. You just have to take this and put it into a helicopter, and you get altitude hold. And so with that out the way, let's go ahead and build the rotor blades. By the way, if you are enjoying the video, then definitely consider subscribing. These rotor blades look terrible, but again, for the sake of demonstration, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to mount the variable thrusters right on the inside. You can put them on the outside, but I just like the cleaner aesthetic of having them be less visible. And there we go, that's all 4 of them. And yes, these are glitch welded thrusters, so there's more than one in there. And some people would call that cheating, but if you don't want to glitch weld thrusters, then just don't glitch weld them. Like, it's not that big of a deal. The only reason I do it is because it achieves the same thing and it looks a lot cleaner. So I'm just going to hook a logic gate into all of these for the sake of simplicity, so I only have one to worry about. So now I'm just going to spawn in the vertical motion sensor. I will upload this to the workshop if you want to use this one, but they're not actually that hard to build. It's just a little bit of fine tuning. There we go, vertical motion sensor has been installed. Next I'm going to do the 3 main buttons, and then the controller, and lastly the logic, which is going to be set up in the exact same way. And after wiring up the logic in the exact same way that I did with the example, we now have a very stable hover. On a side note, despite the fact that this system makes it so that you never have to fine-tune the weight of the helicopter, it doesn't mean that weight distribution shouldn't be a consideration. You always want to make sure that the center of mass is directly underneath your rotor blades. And you could do that by just trial and error, or you can get a mod like this that shows you exactly where the center of mass is. And as you can see, my center of mass is pretty much exactly in the middle of those rotors. Step 3 is the control surfaces. There's 2 main ways to go about this: thrusters and glitches. In general, if you can avoid using glitches, then do it, because thrusters are just way more frame rate friendly. But this helicopter doesn't really have enough space for me to fit a bunch of thrusters in here in a way that actually looks good, so I'm going to stick to glitches. Now if you don't know how to make a suspension glitch, step 1 is to make sure the creation is on a lift. It won't work unless it's on a lift. Then make sure you have 4 available blocks, and then place down a bearing with 2 blocks in the middle, and then a corner pipe, suspension, and the other corner pipe. And when you place down that last corner pipe, make sure both the bearing and the suspension are lit up. Now to power this, I'm just going to use an engine. Then you just connect that to the seat and change the value of the engine. This is probably going to be subject to change, but I'll just put it in the middle for now. And next we have roll, which I can put right over there behind the vertical motion sensor. And this one is going to be connected directly to the seat, and make sure that positive is going clockwise. And you're going to want to change this to be max speed, but a very small angle, probably like 5 or 7. The last one is yaw, and you can do this with suspension glitches as well, but I actually use thrusters and I mount them right over here. And if you just move them down a little bit, they're very unobtrusive and they work really well. And after wiring everything up, we now have a fully controllable helicopter. We just have to tip forwards, and as you can see, we're off. And it's really stable. But you might be able to notice something. First of all, as there's only one rotor, when we tip forwards, there is a little bit of torque. And when we tip backwards, again, it's the same thing. And that can be solved pretty easily. The other issue is that the controls are very floaty. Like when you let go of a control, it just continues drifting on its own for a little bit before finally deciding to actually stop. And both of those issues can be solved in the same way. All you need is a suspension glitch stabilizer, and there's plenty of tutorials on how to make one of those yourself. But basically you just grab one and weld it somewhere in the creation. It doesn't really matter where you weld it, so I'm just gonna put it right over here. Just like that. And now when I try and fly it, you'll instantly notice that when I let go of W, it instantly stops. And it's just so much easier to control where you're going and pretty much the entire helicopter. Alright, I just adjusted the engine power on the pitch and now it's flying a lot better. Now it's time for the fun part, the weapons. The simplest kind is of course spud guns. So you just put them on the creation and yeah, you get weaponry. But missiles are a little bit more complicated. This is my 7th attempt at making missiles, and I don't think I can make it much better than this. I had to do a lot of manual tinkering around to get to this stage, but lucky for you guys, you get to skip all that. So we're going to start with the sensor array at the front. We just need sensors pointing in every direction, including down, which we can do just like this, and then by glitch welding it in further. But before we do that, I'm just going to place a logic gate right over here and then connect all the sensors to that logic gate. And we're going to make it an OR gate. And now I'm going to glitch weld this into the rest of the missile. Now in this area, we can put a small explosive just like that. Now behind the small explosive, we need 3 guns that are all pointing right into it, and they can't be glitch welded into each other. And then in the space over here, we're going to insert a suspension glitch stabilizer. So I'm just going to weld this on, and now on the end I'm going to place a explosive, and on top of that I'm going to put the thrusters so that I can start glitch welding them. But before I glitch weld them anywhere, I'm going to need to put a logic gate down so that I have something to connect them all to. We're going to make it max power and move it down. So now it should still be connected and have max power, and now we're just going to do that once again. Connect it and then down, and we're going to repeat that one more time, and there we go. Now we have 3 thrusters, 2 small explosives, and it's stabilized. Now we just have to do the rest of the logic. So first up, we need the detachment part. So we're just going to have a sensor facing upwards and then push that forwards, and then we're going to need that part. It doesn't really matter what part it is as long as it's 2 blocks tall, but that one looks the best since it actually gets painted unlike the rest of them. So I'm just going to place this like that, and now I'm going to get some logic set up over here so I can use it. So the logic itself is actually quite simple. We just need to hook this sensor into an inverter, or a NOR gate in this case, and so when this is high, that means this block has been deleted, which means the missile should be armed. So this logic gate should just connect straight to the thrusters and turn them on, and it should also connect to the AND gate, and so should the sensors. And so if the sensors detect anything and the missile is actually on, then it should fire all of these spud guns. And now we just have to adjust some of these sensor distances. If the sensor distance is too high, then it'll actually start detecting the helicopter as it leaves, so that's definitely not a good thing. And now the rest of it is just some balancing. Because this is just a copy paste of that missile, I already know where the balancing goes, but if you're building your own missile, then you should probably do some experimentation before just blindly following what I'm doing. And with that, the missile is complete. There are a couple things to bear in mind though. First of all, you only want 1 stabilizer. The more you have, the laggier it gets, and you only really need 1 to make it go straight. You also don't want any more than like 3 explosives. This one has 2, and that's more than enough to blow up the entire missile as well as whatever it's hitting. More missiles doesn't make it more powerful, it just makes it heavier, slower, laggier, and less accurate. So it's all around just worse. And the reason why the detachment block needs to be 2 blocks tall is so that when you weld it to a creation, it doesn't accidentally get welded to any other part of the creation. And if you made this sensor a color sensor so that it doesn't detect the rest of the helicopter as it's leaving, then be careful if you use a creation paint tool, because if you paint it the wrong color, then you could set the whole thing off, and that would be a bit of an issue. And in order to make the missile as centered as possible, using a creation center of mass finder is again very helpful, because it lets you very easily see which side has more mass and you can balance it accordingly. And finally, make sure to use legacy parts instead of the level 5 alternatives, because level 5 parts don't get exploded by small explosives, so as you fire off more and more missiles, you just leave behind a very laggy debris field full of level 5 parts that won't explode. Now when it comes to installing them on a creation, the first thing I do is just weld them all in the places where I want them to sit. So I'll have one right over here, and I'll put another one over here, and then make sure to repeat it on the other side. Now I just mount the spud guns, and the sensors can go right next to them. And the logic for this is quite simple. I'm just going to place down a bunch of gates. So first of all, the 4 logic gates that actually fire the spud guns need to be hooked into the button that I used to fire them. And then the sensor that corresponds to that should also be hooked into them. So just hook up the sensors in the right firing order, And now you also need the NOT gates of the sensors from just before them. So we're going to start off with this one right here, and then that one, and lastly that one. And we're going to make these NOT gates, or in this case NOR, because we don't have NOT gates in this game. Now we're going to hook this one into the second, this one into the third, and this one into the fourth. And then they just go to their corresponding spud guns. So first goes to the first one, second goes to the second one, third to the third, and fourth right there. So in theory that should be all the logic required. By the way, make sure you save your creations before testing the missiles. Oh yeah, notice how the system has automatically corrected for all the weight that I added with those missiles, and we still have a stable hover. And when I press the fire button, in theory they should all fire in the correct order. And just like that, we have now armed our helicopter. That is sick. And once again, take a look at how stable we are. Despite having lost all of that weight, we're still in a nice even hover. At this point you pretty much have a finished helicopter, and there's only a few finishing touches that I like to add, like some forwards facing thrusters. It's not that realistic, but it does make flying a lot easier. And after some finishing touches, I'm left with a very capable, stable and easy to fly vanilla helicopter that happens to be able to blow some stuff up.